in the right-hand corner. Now it's live.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Cycle 2016. Our second session is with Wolf. Help me with your last name. How do I say that correctly?
That's von Laer.
Well, try it one more time. Maybe I had the mute going.
It's Wolf von Laer.
Von Laer. Oh, sounds very
Yes.
serious. Okay, all right. I'm looking over my shoulder because we have the live audience here too. Thank you so much for joining us. We love working with Students for Liberty, and you know, name like Wolf, how could we say no? That's an inside joke, everybody. You're supposed to laugh. But the subject here I'm really excited about, emotional intelligence. This is something I've touched on in some of my past Life 101 style talks, and even though our title is Liberty and Entrepreneurship, I mean, freedom starts between your ears. And emotional intelligence is, I think, one of the least talked about and most essential subjects in all of the human condition. So, Wolf, thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Lobo. It's a great honor to speaking to you. And before I'm jumping into the topic, I would like to invite you to have a thought experiment with me. Just imagine, now you have listened to Lobo, you have listened to Rick Rule, you have listened to Casey, and all of your wishes and dreams come to pass. You become successful, whatever you want to do. You become an academic, an entrepreneur, maybe a lawyer, whatever your aspirations are. Everything is good. You have all the money in the world. You don't have to fear anything really. Let's say in this world, everything seems to be fine, right? However, now imagine you go with a problem to a friend of yours and say like, look, I'm really in love with this girl. I'm not sure if I should ask her out. What do you think I should do? And your friend just says, oh, that's just stupid. You should not worry about it. And he dismisses what your concerns are. Or you say that you have like huge problems in your businesses and you're going to your parents and you want to talk about that, and they just say like, oh, man up and don't worry about it and don't like just be like who you are, and don't be like really ashamed of that you're worrying about that right now. Like in such a world where nobody really mirrors your feelings, you will not be happy. Even if you have all the material well-being in the world, it doesn't really is that what you personally need. And that's the reason why I want to talk today about emotional intelligence. Lobo is absolutely right in saying that this is not very talked about very often because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about feelings, to share that sometimes we are worried, we are feeling like imposters, we are anxious about our future, because we always have to come across as like these super human beings who are working 70, 80 hours a week and do not flinch about that and always are very positive about the future. But that's unfortunately not the reality. And therefore, I would like to introduce you to the topic of emotional intelligence and leadership. And let me just square my screen with you now and go to my presentation when I can see it. There we go. I presume you can see it now.
Yeah.
So, hello, my name is Wolf, as Lobo already said, and I'm the Director of Professional Development for Students for Liberty. And at the same time, I'm also working on the end stage of my PhD at King's College London in political economy. And currently, I am here for a 4th of July party in the United States, but as you can probably tell, I cannot hide it. I'm originally from Germany. I have still like the accent, and nowadays I'm living in Stockholm, Sweden, to make things complicated. But first, I would like to tell you the reasons why I think we should talk about this. So whatever you want to do in your life, you will achieve more and you will be more successful if you have people coming along the way with you, if you have business partners, if you have friends, if you have family. And if you build any kinds of organization, non-profit, for-profit, an organization is only as good as the people within it. And you can only improve yourself if you fully understand yourself and understand your weaknesses and your strengths, and the same with your coworkers. And in order to grow as a human being, you have to be open for positive feedback, but also negative feedback. And if you don't have like emotional intelligence, you will not be able to understand this, and you will probably dismiss criticism that is really important to you. And also studies over studies have shown that yes, you need to be intelligent. You need to have like a decent intelligent quotient in order to be successful. However, at some point, IQ doesn't predict success anymore. goes down. However, EQ, the emotional quotient, is a better predictor of success because you're capable of dealing more with other human beings. Also, many of the people who are probably listening to this now are students and young people, and also maybe like older people who want to achieve more things. Achieving more things means you doing stuff that you have not done before. There will be uncertainty. There will be things that will be challenging you, and therefore there will be uncertainty. You will face uncertainty, you will be challenged, and you will experience difficult emotion. However, none of the institutions we are in, neither school, neither university, very little family is helping you to understand these emotions and tell you how to deal with them. And so we have to very often learn this on our own. And I'm glad that like people like Lobo and many others are also starting to talk about that more, because it is so important for personal success, personal well-being, and but also organizational success. And if you think about it, many people seem to be complacent with the life that they know because they don't want to challenge themselves. They have their, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but they have their 9-to-5 job, and maybe they have like bigger aspirations. They want to do something else, but they are just fearful. They don't know if they can do this, and maybe like some other people also tell them, oh, like, yeah, you cannot start your own business. Like, who do you think you are? And therefore, fear stops them. And if we acknowledge the fear and can deal with this sort of emotions better, then we also can overcome it and just push against it. Because everyone, I believe, who will speak to you this week and who is successful and who has made money and who has like successful businesses, they felt fear many times in their life. But they were not discouraged by it. They acknowledged it and just pushed against it and went further. So I think these sorts of reasons, if you put them together, make a strong case why we should deal with this, even if it's like not very common to deal with emotions, to talk about that. Also, going back to the organizational level, you need trust from other people if you want to lead them. If everybody is fearful in your company, sure, you can push through some things, but it will not be helpful very much. You can only inspire people and lead people if they really trust you, if they feel safe around you. If you're blowing up every, I don't know, 30 minutes about something that's went wrong in the organization and you scream at people, they will be fearful of you, and therefore they will not tell you how they feel about the operations and give you critical feedback that you need. However, if you are open for criticism and make them feel that they can voice their concerns and have an input in your organization, you can improve it, and they will also be more likely to follow you as a leader and contribute to your organization. And the basic human fact is that emotional, like not really safety, but that other people mirror our emotions and that we feel valued by other human beings is a fundamental human need. There's also studies showing that the centers in the brain, the regions that are responsible for giving us pain or pleasure, these are the same centers that give us also feedback about emotional pain. It's the same pain, it's nothing else. If we are rejected about something, let's say you have like an awesome business proposal, you are really, really passionate about it, and you go to 20 investors and pitch in, and everybody tells you how stupid this is, you will feel really bad. People reject you. And the worst of rejection is, of course, when your parents reject you as a kid. You really feel something and they say like, oh, yeah, dismiss it. So it's evolutionary ingrained in us. And why? Because it really ensures our safety. If we, when we were back like in tribal societies, if we are not part of the community and people don't trust us and they would reject us, this would translate to certain death. Because we didn't have like the societies we have now where we can live on our own and sustain our own to some extent. And that is deeply ingrained in us. That's the reason why emotional connection and connecting to other human beings is so important. And it makes perfect sense, but it's very rarely acknowledged. So what can we do? Everybody knows and everybody says that we have to take care of our bodies. We have to take care of our health. You have to eat somewhat healthy. You have to exercise in order to perform well, to be productive. However, we use our mind every day. We're worrying about all kinds of things. We are always thinking, and we're always worrying about stuff, but we don't know how to take care of it. It's just what it is. Sometimes we feel anxious, sometimes we feel happy, but we do not know how to deal with that if some stuff is overwhelming. And we do worry all the time, and it's very difficult sometimes to understand like what is worrying that is useful and what is worrying that is not useful. So I can tell you, when I was applying for my PhD program at King's College London, I was very sick for like 3 months because felt very insecure. Like, what if I cannot do that? Like, what if I'm starting at this like prestigious university in London and people just see that my ideas are not good? What if I cannot come up with like a really good thesis? What if I cannot find the data? I was worried about this and I just felt bad for the longest time. However, that worrying was not productive because there's no way of me like knowing without doing it if I can actually do it. It is good to worry about the next steps in your business and the next step of your PhD. What should I do next? What should I read? What should I do? However, if you just worry if you cannot do something or not, there's no way of you knowing, but it makes you feel bad and you will just make yourself crazy. And why is that? Because we are evolutionarily designed not to be happy, but to survive. I repeat that. We are evolutionarily designed not to be happy. Our mind is programmed in telling us that we should do something else in order to survive, to feel uneasiness, in the words of Mises, if you're acquainted with them. Because if you just feel happy all the time and your mind says you're just the most awesome person in the world, you don't have many incentives to act and to improve your situation. So our mind doesn't want us necessarily to be happy, but we can be. And so there are like better and worse strategies for doing that. And on every given day, sometimes you wake up and you have a great day, and then you get like one email about like that you maybe have failed like an exam, or that you will have to learn much more for the next exam, or whatever your situation is. Then you probably feel really bad, and then you're worried the rest of your day. So there's like a volatility of feelings, and we are very bad at controlling them. And just thinking about that and saying like, oh, why do I feel this way now, and becoming anxious about it does not really help us. So what can you do? You can be first and foremost be aware of your emotions, because we know that like pushing away emotions doesn't work. One second. And this goes back to the point that I've made. You have to be able to distinguish between like when is worrying good for you, when you're making the right steps in order to improve your well-being and the organizations and the work you're doing, and when is it unproductive, when you can say like, okay, it's not like so important to worry about that now. But even if you know that, it doesn't necessarily go away. And very often we are in situations, especially of people who want to achieve much, that you have like many things to do and you don't know what the next steps are, and you feel anxious. Or you are around people right now who have done so much more. You feel insecure and deficient sometimes. Like, you're talking at this conference about business, about starting new things. You talk to people who have made millions of dollars, who start several businesses, and maybe also the people in the audience also seem to be like much better than you, and you feel just bad. I can give you an example when I felt that way. When I started as a volunteer with European Students for Liberty in 2011, I was sitting around the table with individuals like Alexander McCoben, who started it. He raised several millions of dollars every year. He's my age. There was also Frederick Röder, a good friend of Lobo, and he has also spoken at cycle events. And he was younger than I am, or is younger than I am. And he has started several businesses. He traveled around the world, and he knew everyone and everything. And these people were talking about the situation in Europe and what we should do. And I thought, I have not like a shred of the experience that these people have. And like my mind was telling me, okay, what are you doing here? Like, can you really do this? Like, how do you contribute? And I was not able to listen because I felt very bad. I mean, of course I was contributing and I was learning a lot, but it was not very helpful that my mind was in this state. And later I showed the organization that I started the local coordinator program. I trained students from all around Europe. I raised the money for that. I was later the chairperson of European Students for Liberty. I organized conferences with several hundreds of people, and now I'm working for them full-time as director of professional development. I was able to see that I can contribute all of these things, but in that situation I did not realize that. And I talked to other people who were also at the same meeting, and they felt the same way, but nobody ever mentioned that. And just knowing about this, that other people also going through that, if you're not a psychopath, of course, then that already helps you quite a bit. So it is good to be curious about your mind, even if you don't feel good. If you try to push away your feelings, it doesn't work. It just stays there. But it's a totally different thing to diffuse from your thoughts, and that's the word from psychology, which basically means that you acknowledge what you're feeling right now. Okay, thank you mind that you're telling me that I'm fat and ugly, but that you're not like saying these thoughts are you. You don't have to necessarily identify with them. They're just thoughts and they pop up. And depending on how you feel, for instance, if you don't sleep very well, if you have been drinking the last night, it's likely that you feel bad the next day. And how your body feels influences your mood. And if you're aware of that, then you might know, oh, maybe if I just take a nap, then I might feel better. But if you take everything that your mind throws at you for as truth, that your mind tells you, oh, you're ugly, you're not capable, you're not intelligent enough, everyone is better than you, then you will just feel that and you will act in that way. But if you say like, okay, this is just another thought, it happens, thank you mind, and move on, this is a more productive way of dealing with that. So diffuse from them, taking distance from them. It is difficult and it takes practice, I know it, but being aware is the first step. And this connects not only to productivity, because if we are capable of managing our emotions better and dealing also with days where we don't feel very bad, we are like more productive, but it's also about leadership and understanding others. Let's say that you have somebody working below you. You have a business and there is your secretary. And he was very good. You hired him and he was working very, very hard over the last couple of months. And now something has changed. In the last couple of weeks, this person came in late. He made many typos in your reports and things are not going well. You talked to the person, you were nice and said like, look, you cannot do this and you're making more mistakes, like what is going on? And the person promises you to improve his performance, but nothing happens. And you're starting to think like, oh, this guy maybe he was cheating me, tried to like get this job and act very well, and then like now he's like totally lazy. And then at some point you might be considering firing this person. And you have like a very serious talk with them, and at that conversation this person breaks down in tears and tells you that in the last 3 months like his parents died in a car accident. At that point your whole worldview would shift and you would not like think this person is lazy or didn't want to like undermine your business or whatever thoughts you had. But our mind is very good in always taking very few data points and making complex stories about how other human beings behave. But we very often act on false assumptions. We think, okay, these people are just like stupid or not very productive or don't really understand the importance of our work or whatever it is. And that is also tied together with our failure to listen. Because it's very easy to have like our own story, but it's very hard to listen to others and really hear what they're saying and trying to understand where they're coming from, to really know what's going on. Because it's not fun to talk about stuff that is making other people miserable, because you will not feel like really good if they are sharing with you that they just went through like a very bad time. And how often is that we truly understand one another? Everyone who has worked in a student group or with anyone else realizes that very often we have teamwork and we think we're on the same page, but like the product of our work will be not really good, and we see that our teamwork was really bad. And that's a communication problem. And that happens very often in business and all kinds of organization. And if you're capable of listening better and listening more, you can not prevent that necessarily, but you can mitigate the effects of it and reduce the likelihood that this happens. And I would make the argument that leadership is to a great extent about that. Being empathetic and finding out what the problem is. Like making people feel that they can share what's going on in their own life. Because people are not robots. They're just not like working for you. They have a personal life and bad things will happen to them. And if they feel that they can share these things and not being like discouraged by that, that will be very important for them and for their trust in you. So what can you do? How can you develop emotional intelligence and also become at the same time more productive? For me, these things go together. So first of all, you should have like some kind of curiosity about your feelings, because they come and go and sometimes you don't understand them. But if you try to really listen in, not to push them away and just like party very hard and hope that the feelings will go out the next time, but trying to get to the root of it, that will probably be helpful. I've talked already about diffusion. That is an important step. But also having the uncomfortable conversation in life, that is a personal value of mine. I want to know like how other people feel and what's going on with them, because very often other people don't do that. So I don't want to name names, but I have a good friend of mine, and he at some point has lost his father, and he shared that fact on Facebook. And I was seeing him in person, and he has tons of people working for him, and everybody knows him, etc., etc. And I asked him, like, I don't know if you want to talk about that. Maybe like all people are like annoying you with this, but how are you feeling? How do you do? And he basically told me that nobody approached him about this, and that nobody asked him how he's doing, and like why was his father so important to him, and what role did his father play in his life. And I was just shocked by that, like why nobody did that. Of course, it was not a pleasant conversation. I was rambling, and I was not able to find the right words. But he and I, we connected on a deeper level together because we had this conversation, and he told me about like the important things that his father done for him and why he was such an important person in his life, and he felt better afterwards. And this is like something very not easy, but it's like something what one can do, and like you will have a better relationship with the person afterwards. Another thing that's important to realize is that you're not alone. That many people feel that even people who act all the time very confident and have achieved all these things, they will feel fearful at some point. That they feel that as if they cannot do the things that they're doing. And of course, the older we're getting, the more experience we're getting, it becomes better. But these feelings are not going away. So learning how to deal with them is a lifelong project, but it's necessary in order to be successful. We can also talk about like this buzzword, I don't really like it, but it's called mindfulness, and that goes together with like meditation. But I'm not someone who does like stuff just because of it, or like who believes in esoteric explanation, but you can look at the data and at the studies, and they show you that if you do like meditation, if you pay more attention to your feelings, if you're more aware of what's going on, you will be more empathetic, you will be more happy, you will understand yourself better, you will be more productive, you have a less likelihood of experiencing depressions. All of these things are backed up by data, and you can look it up online. Just Google mindfulness practice and studies, and you will find a whole host of these things. And it's important. And I don't know how you see that, but most people, when I'm talking with them about these topics, they say that this is fundamentally crucial to them because they hang out with their friends and family because they have meaningful and trusting relationship with them. And it's one thing to talk about like about soccer and drinking and like sports and whatever, but for most people that is not enough. It's not fulfilling. But if you have like an important conversation about love, life, the meaning of it, problems that you have, and people really understand you and get you and give you valuable feedback, that is something like much more important. So I do meditation and these things. That is like a solution. Another thing is that you can taking a step back. So when I was worrying about my PhD and if I can do that, and now I'm in the final stage, I have peer reviews, articles, my data looks really cool, and like I've achieved all these things. Sometimes it's just good to take like a step back. Okay, like I'm worrying about all of these things, but is it really worthwhile to worry about it? And then you can think about all these things that you've already achieved and like the reasons why you're actually not should be able to achieve that. Like what are the reasons why you cannot do X and Y? And most of the time, they're not really good reasons. Sure, you're afraid. Sure, you might not have the experience, but you can just do it. And that's what it's about, just taking action and doing something. And that means overcoming your feelings first before you can take action. You can reevaluate your choices and goals and values. So a very good practice that I've done is that every quarter I'm having quarterly reflections, a reminder. Then I go somewhere in nature and I'm just like asking myself the question, for instance, what do I want people to say when I'm dead? Like people standing at my grave, what do I want people to say about me? Do I want them to say, Wolf has the most money and he sold the best products ever? Is that what I want? Or is it rather that Wolf was someone who really listened to me and who made me feel like safe, and he built me up as a leader and he gave me opportunities in life that would not have been possible. He was somebody that I deeply trusted and value. That is something that I want to hear. And like this question basically shows your own mortality and really boils down what the things that are important in your own life. Because you have to know what your values are in order to make the right steps. Because it's very easy to get caught up in all the daily business. Every day you get like tens of emails, hundreds of emails, and you could do tons of different things, but you don't know which actions to take if you don't know which direction you want to go. But if your values are that you want to contribute to society, if you want to help other people, if you want to make other people wealthy, if you know about these values, then you can make better decisions in that context. Journaling also helps quite a bit. So what I'm doing quite often is when I have too many things to do and I wake up and I feel overly anxious about everything, I just write down what's going on in my life, like what I'm worried about. Then I'm seeing this and I say like, okay, this is not such a big deal. I can do steps A, B, Z, A, B to Z, and that's what I'm doing, and then I feel already better. If you just have everything in your head and you have like 100 items of your to-do list in your head and not like physically written down, then of course you become anxious. We cannot handle all of this information. Another important question which I fail to ask myself very often is about your own self-talk. Would you treat your friend, if she comes to you and shares her emotions, in the same way as you're treating yourself? We tend to be like much harsher on ourselves and be very, even sometimes aggressive and violent about ourselves, like, oh, we are fat and ugly and we are not good for anything. We would never talk to a friend like that. But why do we talk to ourselves like it? If we're becoming aware of that, we can stop it and say like, okay, this is just like an old story and it's not true. That's not who I am. I know that I can produce something of value and that I'm worth it. And this is the emptying our short-term memory is about like just getting stuff on paper and not being overwhelmed by all the things that are going on. And therefore, like people like the founder of Virgin Corporation, what's his name? I'm just blanking on the name. Like he makes lists all the time, and that's also the reason, because he has 500 businesses under him, and he doesn't know like what to do if he doesn't write lists all the time in order to come up with ideas and put it down. This is also about productivity, and if you work with other people, everybody talks about the importance of giving feedback, and that is relatively easy, right? You have to have a good relationship with people, which is not easy, but that's fairly straightforward. You have to be precise about it. You have to know that the other person is capable of hearing you. You should not tell them, you are rubbish because you have done X and Y. You should say like, look, when you have written this report, like these spelling errors, that was not very good. Can you take a little bit more care of that next time? Like doing it a little bit careful and making sure that the other person can really hear you. If somebody is like stressed out of their mind, selling at the moment all their stocks and bonds and whatnot, and like really stressed, this person will not able to hear your feedback on something else. So they have to be in a place where they can do that. You also have to take the cultural context into account, because in many societies, losing face is the worst thing ever. So you cannot really give them feedback directly. In America and like in Germany and other countries, it's easier, but you have to be aware of the cultural context and the code, how to approach that. However, for you personally, it's more important that you can actually receive feedback. Our mind is not only designed to make us survive, but also to protect us. Criticism of what we are doing is basically saying that you're not good enough, and our mind tries everything to rationalize the story why the other person is wrong. Just think about it. Next time if somebody tells you something about yourself, what you have done wrong, your mind will automatically come up with hundreds of explanations why this person is wrong. There are emotional barriers to it, and therefore you have to be aware of that, and you have to really be careful to listen and try not to just reject everything the other person is saying. Surely it might be that the criticism is wrong and falsely stated. That can happen. But you should just make the first step and listen, and not trying to defend yourself, because that will be the first thing that our minds wants to do. And this translates in all kinds of contexts. This is the reason why we cannot really argue about politics in a rational way. And I can recommend the book by Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind, which shows studies over studies how we are very irrational about that. Like, even if you think you have the most logical arguments why a free society is good for people and it will lead to prosperity, people not necessarily listen to you, and they will not necessarily buy your arguments, especially if you come across as rude and not as a very nice human being. So it's more important to also listen to other people and to take this seriously, and not just saying like that they're evil because they're believing in like one kind of state solution or another. And there's studies showing how our mind works there. So for instance, they have tested, I think, students at Yale about their level of numeracy, like their math skills actually. And then they have given them a study about skincare, like some kind of cream. And there were some mistakes in the study. And people were capable of finding the mistakes and criticizing the study. They gave the same data, now put into like a pro-gun, anti-gun context. Very highly ideologically charged topic. Some people against any kind of gun protection, some for banning guns, you know. And these people with higher math skills subconsciously or consciously made much more mistakes in order to motivate the conclusions they believed were correct. And our mind is programmed in that way. And why? Because our ideology and what we're believing is so important to our identity. And our identity is important to our group. And our group is evolutionary important to our survival. So understanding these things, we can be like try to be more rational. Because we are not perfectly rational, unfortunately, because we have all these things going on. But being aware of them is the first step. And it's all about habits, I would say, in order to have a productive life and productive relationship. It's about big picture planning. Again, like not being lost in your email inbox, but also making steps about like, okay, where do you want to be next year, in 3 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? You also have to take care of yourself. Like, I mean, if you take care of your mind, but you are maybe drinking every night, and I'm not against drinking, but you will feel like worse the next day most likely. And if you eat just crap food, then you will feel it in that way. And if you don't take care of yourself, this will lead to also emotional states which will make you less productive. You also have to make sure that you know how you are at your best. Like if you're working on a business plan where you have to be very concentrated and where you have to think long term and you have to think about the investors and all of these things, or if you're thinking about a paper you want to publish, it doesn't matter. Like these sorts of creative tasks, you cannot be at your best when you're getting like emails every second and you're answering them and you're on Google Chat and you're Skyping with people. You have to know like what is the environment that is more conducive for the task that you're trying to solve. And you should also make time for that, because it's very easy to be overwhelmed by the demands of every day, but you have to schedule time about reflecting, learning, taking time for yourself, meditating, all of these things. Doing something new, because you can only grow as a human being if you challenge yourself and do something new. And you should ask yourself the question like, what habits, if implemented, would make a significant positive impact on your life? And if you have an answer to that, maybe it's like stop smoking or start running or whatever you want to achieve. If you know that this would disproportionately affect your life in a positive way, then you can take steps in order that in that direction. And it's not easy. So what you could do, for instance, is to start small. Not saying, I will run by the end of next month 20 kilometers or 20 miles or whatever it is, and that you will do like an Ironman in like 1 year or something. That you have like small goals. Like tomorrow I go running for 1 kilometer, and then you reward yourself with like your favorite ice cream or something. That you should also get like an accountability buddy, that somebody is doing it with you. And if you're failing, that you're not beating yourself up, because you have to commit to the progress and to a process of improvement. There will be setbacks, and at some point when you, for instance, want to lose weight, there might be times when you eat like a bucket of fried chicken or eating like the ice cream thing, and you should say like, okay, that has been a setback, but you should just like treat yourself nicely and commit to the process of losing weight or whatever it is. What also is important is that you should challenge yourself on a regular basis, doing something that you've never done before. Learn something new, because that will give you all kinds of ideas for stuff what you're doing right now. It will make you more interesting. It will make you just a more rounded human being. So I just recently, I never liked the idea of inflicting violence to others and also like touching people a lot, but I started doing Krav Maga, which are like the self-defense techniques of the Israeli army, and I had to learn how to punch people in the face, and that was very uncomfortable. It was very challenging, and I'm not the fittest dude, but it was a very good experience, and I started enjoying it. And it was not within my comfort zone, but I stepped out of it, and each time in my life when I stepped out of it, when I challenged myself and did the PhD anyways, when I challenged myself and applied for the position in European Students for Liberty, or all kinds of other activities, I've grown, I've learned something, and even if I failed, I was better off next time. If you never leave your comfort zone and you're complacent, maybe that's the right choices for you, but if you want to achieve a lot in life, then that is not a way you could go, like a road that you can follow in order to achieve your goals. So, to summarize, and then we can go into Q&A, we need more emotionally intelligent leaders. We need more people who care about these things to improve ourselves, to become more productive, to be just more happy as well. Like if I know that if I meditate more, I like appreciate more of the small things, and I'm in nature, and suddenly I just feel much better. If I don't do that, I'm just stressed and I'm thinking about like all the problems that I have in life and never take some time to reflect on about the good stuff, then I don't feel happiness, and it is really amazing how this works. It is important to lead other people, to inspire other people, because if people think that you have their well-being in mind and that they can trust you, they will be inspired by you and what you're doing. And just by reducing suffering, I mean, all of the anxiety and the stress that we experience in Western societies, there's like so much going on, and we don't talk about that. I mean, we had experience in SFL where we were hanging out with people, we were partying, we had a great time, and suddenly several people in our organization killed themselves. And nobody knew like what was going on, and they were suffering, and we didn't know it. And we can reduce that. And I mean, it happens every freaking day. It's not like something that just like that these people are sick or anything. It's just like it happens to so many people. And if you start talking about it, many people, and very intelligent people, and there are studies showing that, are more likely to battle with depression. It is a phenomenon, and being aware of that, that's already quite helpful. To be able to receive and give constructive feedback is fundamental in order to grow as a human being, and this will help you achieve your goals. And I believe that we need more people like Lobo and many other leaders probably in your audience at this conference who talk about that in order to make life easier and to make success more likely. These are just like some resources that I enjoyed, that I've read in the past, and that I've enjoyed thinking about, and you can take a look at them. And I really thank you for your time listening to me, and if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. Thank you very much. So now I'm trying to not share my screen anymore. Lobo, are you there? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay,
I can.
We do have several questions that came up, and maybe you know, your reward for actually being here. We do have actual human beings here in the room.
Excellent.
And more on the way. Anybody have any questions? We did get some online, but you're here. Anybody have anything?
Yes. Go first. Yeah. Basically, the question is, recently there was a lot of talk about this emotional intelligence and everything else in business community in Belarus, and one of the ideas that was circulated a lot and was discussed is that in turbulent times and in difficult situations in developing economies, it is psychopaths that are able to do a sustained business, because it's nearly impossible for emotional person who feels the pain of other people, who feel the pain himself, to lead the company and to create a company in a very difficult environment at difficult times. And when the economy is developed, then it's more like emotionally intelligent people take place, when they could build processes and everything else. So what do you think about it?
Should I repeat the question, or do you think the audience has heard that?
Let's repeat the question. I'm not sure the microphone was good. Online audience.
Okay. Yeah, the question is a fascinating one. So the gentleman asked that there's basically showing that there are like more people in developing economies being in businesses and positions of power who are more likely to be psychopaths. And it's very hard for like in developing economies for people who are like more emotional and who are like feeling more stress in like a terminal, like a very volatile business environment, that they are not like in these positions of power. And he asked me what I think about that. I think it's a fascinating question, especially because it made me think about, this is exactly another argument why the stuff that we're talking about here is important. Because psychopath, and I think the statistics show that every 1 in 100, so if we have like several thousand people over listening right now, there are some among them who might be like on a scale more on the psychopathic level, which doesn't mean that they kill people, it just means they have not like the same kind of emotion response that like normal people do. This also shows that like very often it's true that they are in position of power because they don't stress out about all of these things that I was talking about. They don't feel like imposters. They know they're awesome and they're just doing it. And if they like hurt someone along the way and make like this business decision which harm other people, he or she does not feel like regret about that. So that's fascinating. One point. On the other hand, you also have the data showing that it's not only in developing economies, but also in government and in high business position, psychopaths are disproportionately represented. I think that that's the case, but I think that mindfulness and like the things that we have talked about here can actually help that, because once you can deal with that, you can compete better with psychopaths, so to speak. So yes, it is a phenomenon, and we have to be aware of that. And I think many decisions that we see worldwide that harm billions of people in business or because of wars and stuff might have been chosen by psychopaths, but if we are more capable of developing ourselves and dealing with these emotions, we can better compete with them. So it is important that we talk about that from that point of view as well.
Okay, good answer. Other questions?
Yes, actually, I don't know personally the definition of emotional intelligence. I didn't read the in Wikipedia or somewhere else. But listening to your talk, I got the impression that emotional intelligence is the ability to consciously change your perspective to somebody else's. Would you agree that or disagree, or maybe comment on that?
I like your definition, and I think it's part of it. That's the definition you just said. I think would also be very closely connected to empathy. Empathy does not only mean that you can empathize with other people. It doesn't mean that you have to say that everything what they're feeling is correct. That is more like a sympathy thing. But it just means that you're capable of like understanding where other people are coming from. That if you see that this person is like working 10 hours a day, and that's like you see that this person's overwhelmed, that you can just say like, okay, maybe you should just take a break and like chill, give a little bit of work to me. Like this is important. This is empathy, and that's part of it. But it's also about being empathetic, not only about others, but for oneself as well. Right? That we understand, like, okay, if we have the story in our mind that we are not good enough for anything, and that will come up, that we just know, okay, this is part of life. This is like how our mind works, and being empathetic about that we just feel shitty, and maybe tomorrow is a new day, and that is also part of it. So definitely, that goes in the right direction.
Wolf, can you give us your definition? What to you is emotional intelligence?
I mean, I like the definition of the individual who just asked the question, and just would include the parts that you also have to be empathizing with yourself. So emotional intelligence, I would say, is the capability of understanding others and people's feelings and one's own feelings, and being able to deal with them productively. And then we can discuss what productively means, because very often I believe that people feel like some difficult emotion, and they just like take either drugs or doing something very risky or drinking a lot. And I have done that. I've been there multiple times. Like I felt like really shitty in situations where I felt like an imposter around like other students for Liberty leaders, and I felt bad. And then I just started drinking in order to feel better. And I'm not saying that people are doing that always to drink. Of course, you can have fun and have a good chat in a bar and like just have a pint. But very often people are also doing that, and that would be, for instance, like an unproductive way of dealing with feelings, because you're not dealing with like what's going on. So productivity of dealing with these sorts of emotions is part of the definition.
That's very interesting, because the 2 points are understanding and dealing, but you do not include in there control. And I think a lot of people, if you said those 2 words to them, emotional intelligence, they would think that they're like Mr. Spock of Star Trek or something, where they can control their feelings, and that's what I think people imagine it is.
Yeah, and I mean that is like a very also like masculine way of dealing with that. I mean, I grew up in Germany, and you don't like, people tell you like man up, don't cry, like boys don't cry. You hear all this bullshit, right? They say like we should not feel these emotions and we should not cry. But we have like the same emotional compass as like the other sex, like female people or like any kind of person, and we also have to deal with that. And the control part is very much emphasized in society, that you should not like when somebody's terrible happens, you just have to be stoic and not show your feelings and all of that, and people value that. But the interesting thing about that is that if you try to control them, if you try to push it away, if you try to say like, oh, just man up, it doesn't help. As a strategy, I've tried that my whole life, but it doesn't work. And studies also have shown that if you just try to push against these feelings and basically deny them, they will just come back later. They don't just vanish. It's like if you have the emotion that you really are not like the capable person that you think you are, and like just telling yourself, oh, I'm awesome and these feelings are bullshit, and you're trying to push them away, they will come back. So control would be nice. In an ideal world, we would be just like happy all the time if we flip a switch, but that's unfortunately how we work. So it is about managing and not control, dealing with them in a productive way and not pushing them away.
We have more questions. Sorry, we have more questions here, and I promise I'll stop jumping in, but I got to jump in on that one too. I agree, but I have a slightly different view, because I don't think control would be in an ideal world something we have, because our emotions tell us important things about the values in the world. If we're upset about something, it's because something bad has happened. If we could always feel happy, it would be kind of like emotional leprosy. Right? Yeah. When you're a leper, you can't feel it when your fingers get hurt and you get cut and you get infected and your body parts start falling off, because you're not getting necessary feedback, even if it's painful feedback. So if you do the same thing emotionally, if you could actually control your emotions like Mr. Spock, I think you become an emotional leper. You deny yourself important information about what's going on in your world. You'd be stumbling around in the dark.
Yeah, and you would just probably like just go around and harm people, and you would not care, right? So we would probably not go anywhere as a species if you don't care about other people.
Maybe we've just defined psychopathy. Okay, any more questions here, guys?
What is the best way to manage emotions from your experience, let's say? So not hide it, but how to express it. But it's not appropriate in any case to express an emotion, right? Sometimes you have to hide it. So what's the best way to manage it?
Remember to repeat the question.
Okay, yes. So the question was basically, how do you go about achieving this? Like, because in very many contexts, it's not appropriate to show them, the gentleman asks. So what can we do with that? And I think I mentioned before, it's a lifelong journey, and I myself am young. I'm like just years old, and I don't want to make the impression that I'm perfect at that, and that I'm like always feeling happiness all the time, and that I've like managed I'm this like Zen master, that I'm like on the mountain and like meditate all the freaking time. That's not the case, and I feel bad from time to time. It happens very often. But to answer your question, I would stress, besides the things that I've like to reiterate, two things. One is that you create your own situations where you are safe to share these feelings and these difficult things. Meaning that you are building up relationship with people close to you or not close to you, people you think you could trust, and just like be open and be vulnerable to them, and then see what happens. Either it will be productive anyways. Either the other person will reject what you're feeling and will be like an asshole about it, and then you know about that this person will be not the right person in your life, or you know that this person will mirror your feelings, will understand where you're coming from, will ask questions, and will try to help you, and you might have won a friend. And this strategy I've employed in my life, and this is how I got to know my girlfriend, talking about these important things. I'm living together with her in Stockholm, and many important friendships. And if you do that, it's difficult, it takes time, it is stressful, it induces anxiety because you don't know how the other person reacts. But if you have these relationships, and maybe it's also with your family, that will help you quite a bit. Because then you have like different, like event, what is it called, like valve, in order to just like voice your feelings and therefore help understanding them better, or like help just like reduce the intensity of them, which normally happens if you talk about it. Point one. Point two is like all the other things that I've talked about here, just writing it down, like seeing it in writing, like what is bothering right you knew, mindfulness and like meditation and stuff. And there are apps like that, and if you can just check it out. It's for free. Go to headspace.com and that's the one I'm using, and they give you 10 days for free. You can do it 10 minutes a day, and you can see if it does anything for you, if you have any difference, and then you have to pay, unfortunately, but there might be also free things, and you can just check it out if it does anything for you. Personally, for instance, if I feel very anxious about something, I just take this app, I listen to it 15 minutes, just like paying attention to what's going on, and I normally tend to feel much better afterwards, and I can like work again, and I'm not like stressing out like a crazy person. So these would be the things that you could approach.
Well, if we have a question from the online audience, we got this earlier on in your talk. What about introverts? It sounds like the whole talk is not predisposed. This is easier for people who already find it easier to talk about their feelings. But if you're a very introverted person, this is really hard for you. Are you just screwed? You're stuck, or how? What tips are there for introverts?
I can see this being more of a challenge for introverts than extroverts. I would consider myself to be an extrovert, but I think it's still, the mechanism is the same. And if I talk about these things, I was like, when I gave this presentation the first time to an audience, I did not know how people would react. I was afraid that they would laugh at me and would like reject it and would not acknowledge that this is happening. I don't think that the emotional barriers to talk to other people about these things, I think, are the same for introverts and extroverts. I think introverts can even have like an advantage, because extroverts have probably many, not necessarily meaningful relationships, but know tons of people with superficial relationships, but introverts might know some friends that they are closer to, and then it might be like a better trust relationship to come up with these sorts of things. It doesn't mean that you have to do it with every human being. You don't have to try to have like meaningful relationships all the time. That's way too exhausting anyways, because it takes energy. But the energy introverts possess as well, and you just have to do it, even though it's difficult. But I don't necessarily think it's so much more difficult for introverts than for extroverts. It's difficult nonetheless, but it becomes easier if you just do it. So like the point of this talk was that you have to basically challenge yourself and sometimes overcome fear. And you will feel fear if you are being vulnerable with another person. And that is unfortunately the step that you have to take in order to have more meaningful relationships. There's no way around it, in my opinion.
I understand. We have almost the same question, but instead of, if you substitute introvert for cultural barriers, you talked about people for whom saving face is very important. How does a person in a culture like that even begin to go around being emotionally honest, you know, and tell somebody at work, you hurt my feelings when you trashed my proposal that way? I mean, that could be a career-ending move in some parts of the world.
Oh, yes. That's a fantastic question, and I'm working with an international audience. Students for Liberty is now on all inhabited continents, and we have people from all walks of life and all kinds of cultures. And I'm a Westerner, obviously, and it's hard for me to be empathetic with that because I don't share the same experiences. But being aware of it, it would be like the first step, and talking about it would be the first step. And I gave this talk, and like a leader from Africa later on came to me and said, like, you're absolutely right, because very often when he's like a context where he doesn't speak English is not his native language, he taught me exactly the same thing that I was telling about, that sometimes if you don't feel you're the best and you're feeling insecure, his English speaking capabilities goes down, and the same is true for me. And just giving this example, he was able to connect with me and like was open with me about this fact as well. And he probably cannot talk with other leaders about that in his cultural context that easily, but it's like the first step. And so we connected about this. And so I cannot give like a blueprint for that, how to deal with this in China or in South Korea, how to do that, or in Japan, which is like a very like rigid and hierarchical society. I don't know how to do best with this, but I mean, just raising awareness and talking about it and trying to do it in like a familiar and more safe context would be the first step. I don't think you should do it with your boss the first time that you really are unhappy with her performance. But it's a challenge, yeah, for sure.
One last question. You mentioned meditation, and do you have any tips for people for whom introspection, not introversion, but introspection, looking inside into their own feelings and thoughts, is the new thing, that they're not used to that? How does one begin? If you like this idea, you want to think about it, you want to try to tune into your feelings, do you have to go sit on the top of a mountain somewhere and say Om, or what do you do?
I mean, different things work for different people, but what I've done is because I wanted to, the question, I mean, the audience might have heard the question, like how to actually get started with meditation and being more mindful. That was the question. My strategy was, and it probably doesn't work for everyone, is I wanted to do it more, and I had a hard time to motivating myself to do it every day, because you have to have a habit about that. It only has to be like 10 minutes or 5 minutes, but it's difficult to do. So what I did is I committed myself to using the AppSpace app to pay, and therefore I paid, and therefore felt like I have to do it now because I paid for it. And then I formed the habit over the year, and I did it very regularly. And this could be like a way, and they're like free sources. So if you just go online and look like for guided meditation, then you can just listen and you can just like take a walk and listen to like walking meditation, or you sit down somewhere. You don't have to. I sit like just on a chair like this. I sit like this, a little bit straight, have my hands on my knees, and I'm just listening to the guided meditation. Close my eyes at some point, and then like pay attention to the breathing. I'm just trying to focus, because it's just about paying, like, because our mind comes all the time with like new stuff up, and it's very easy to be distracted by thoughts. And especially like with our phones and with computer, everything is always like trying to get our attention. But this is just like time for you where you just try to focus. And we are very bad at that, and I'm very bad at it. But even more you practice it, the better you become at it, which also translates to be more focused in your own life. So that is like one thing, just paying attention to the breathing. But it could be listening to your favorite music and just paying attention to the music, or just walking around in nature and listening to like the sounds, what's going on. It's just about like having like one point of focus, and then just concentrate yourself, and always not forcing yourself, but gently putting your focus back to that point, and saying like, if the mind comes up with something else, that's fine. Like, let's focus only on the breath, or let's focus just on walking. And that is basically the practice. And many like different things work for different people. But that's, I will say, guided meditation is the way I got started, and it's a good way about it. But you can do like also retreat and be like silent meditation in the middle of nowhere in Nepal for 10 days, and you cannot talk to anyone. I would not recommend that as the first step, but you can give it a try. And let me know how it goes.
Anybody else have any questions here? Okay, well, that's it for Q&A. On the schedule, we have discussion planned, and as it works out for visa reasons and other things, we don't have a very large crowd today, but we do have a couple people here. Wolf, thank you very much for your time. If you want, you can hang around and we can try to have a bit more discussion, not Q&A, but discussion. If you have to go, that's okay. But first, thank you very much. We appreciate your help. And what do you think? Do you want to try to stick around and experiment with a little discussion, or do you need to go?
No, I can just like hang out a little bit and see what happens.
All right,
And thank you very much for taking the time to listening to this, because it's like I just appreciate people who are interested in this and who are asking engaging questions. So thank you. That's really cool.
So if any of you guys are really shy, now's the time to run out the door. No. This is the discussion. We're going. So I'm going to move around a little bit. Anybody wants to leave, you can run away. I'm going to sit here with you guys, or closer to you guys. Try to circle up here. All right. Whoa! Defective chair.
That's physical. Let's hope it was a chair.
Yeah. So we've never done this before. We've never broadcast a discussion, and I hope you guys are not too shy, and you do not have to say anything. You don't have to answer. This is all voluntary, no coercion here. But hopefully this could come up with something interesting. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask, how many of you think of yourselves as an emotionally open person? Do people know what you're feeling? Are you closed? Do you think? How many people think of themselves as an open person? Raise hand. How many people think of themselves as not open? Okay, so we've got 50-50 here split. Okay. All right. How many of you, I mean, doesn't count because we've just been brainwashed by Wolf's wonderful talk. But before Wolf's wonderful talk, how many of you have thought of yourself as an emotionally intelligent person? Have you even thought of that? Well, that's interesting. Wolf, what do you think about this? I think a big part of this whole concept of emotional intelligence is just, for me, it always comes back to attitude. You know, what is my attitude about emotions? Are emotions a bad thing that have to be controlled? A lot of people feel that way. This whole control thing is because they don't like their emotions. They don't like feeling sad or unhappy. It sucks. But some of them, they don't even like feeling in love. It's chaotic. It's crazy. It turns their world upside down. I think in many cultures we have been taught that our emotions are these wild and crazy and often dangerous things. They're scary. So how, if you can think of yourself as being emotionally intelligent, but if at the same time this is something that's negative, that idea of intelligence is going to be critical. It's going to be attacking your emotions instead of trying to embrace them and learn from them. So quick, again, you can put your hands in your pockets, don't have to say anything. How many of you felt that listening to Wolf talk today, your thoughts or ideas about emotions and emotional intelligence, has it changed any? Does anybody feel like they learned something new today?
Learn something new and change. Those are different options.
That's okay. Change is different from learn something new. Okay. I'll throw one in there. I had not thought about your evolutionary argument that evolution is actually perhaps even in conflict with happiness. We're supposed to be happy all the time. If you were, you'd be sitting there fat and happy, and the lions would eat you, and you'd be out of the gene pool. I have to think about that for a minute, but it actually dovetails nicely with what our Austrian economic friends talk about creative dissatisfaction. And this is interesting. So, what do you guys think? Is that a compelling case? Do you think evolution has programmed us to be unhappy? Is that a too big a claim, or?
I think that contrast is really important, and just like distinguishing light and dark is important, that's how being happy and unhappy at sometimes is also absolutely important part of the life. Again, I really like the speaker's point of view about we need to avoid complete happiness all the time because it's damaging for our survival. But yeah, I'm positive about being unhappy some of the time.
That's an interesting. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Yes.
Wanted to add that emotions are basically very short-term. They rarely last for more than, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or something. Like everything that's longer, it's not longer an emotion.
I hope for my marriage's sake that you're wrong.
Yeah, sorry, but generally, like psychologists and the guys who study like faces, you know, like Dr. Lightman's Lie to Me, etc.
Yeah.
So emotions are very short term. You're not supposed to be like angry all the time. It's just your trigger response, and then when the response is done, basically you are either filled up with dopamine or you're running because you're scared or something. Then everything is calmed down. You're back to normal.
I understand what you're saying. There's a really interesting distinction in there. Well, have you thought about the feeling emotion, like the actual chemical, electrical process that goes off in your brain and your body when you feel an emotion versus an emotional state?
And
do you make
versus emotional what?
Emotional state, yeah, Roman has just pointed out that you feel something, it doesn't last. The emotion is fleeting. But I think there's also, and I joke that I hope that he's wrong for the sake of my marriage, because you know, if my love is fleeting, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
But I think there's also like emotional states that are different from the flash that goes through you. Would you agree with that?
No. I think it's an important distinction, but I'm not sure. I mean, I really had like a shitty time for 3 months when I was studying my PhD, and that I also had that when I started university as an undergraduate. Like I didn't think that I would be able to do it. Like I had like all this doubt, and that went on for like several months. So in general, I would agree with you that feelings are more volatile and fleeting. But love, for instance, Lobo's wife and my relationship and stuff, that normally lasts longer. Sure, it doesn't mean it lasts forever necessarily. That's the reason why people get divorced. But it's not necessary that the feelings are fleeting. And I mean, that's the reason why people have like mental health issues and like become depressed, because they feel shitty every day. That's one point. The other point is, yes, of course, that's the reason why people intoxicate them for millennia, because we are capable of changing a little bit the chemical composition of our mind, of our brain, and feel like happiness or feel bliss. Or that's the reason why people say that on LSD or whatever. I've never taken that myself, but having like these feelings of everything is connected, it's all love, and like it's basically like things are firing in our mind. And of course, that's like the fascinating thing, because we have no clue like how it really works. Very little evidence about that. Like, why do we feel sad at some point, and how does this feeling of sadness, which in reality means that maybe somebody close to us was harmed, how does this translate in a chemical process that makes us feel emotions? I mean, this is just like mind-blowing, and I don't get it, but that's basically the reality we are living with. But yes, there are like states you can induce yourself, and that's the reason why people are taking drugs in order to just feel happy, because it's very difficult for them to do it in their own life.
We don't have any Japanese people here, unfortunately, with us. Maybe there's one online who might want to chime in, but I wonder, have any of you ever felt like punished for being emotionally honest? Like if you were in a school setting or a professional setting and you actually showed your feelings, would you today in an office, you know, if somebody pissed you off, would you feel comfortable showing your anger? Would you feel like you needed to bottle it in? How often do you run into that? I mean, you guys, people are nodding. Okay, audience, I don't know if you can see that out there. People are nodding. Let me refine this. On the one hand, you can't go around screaming and shouting and kissing everybody in your business meetings. That would, you know, be emotionally honest, but not a very effective business meeting if that happened. On the other hand, if the corporate culture you're dealing with, or the university setting, or whatever the environment is, the home setting, is that you couldn't be honest. Like if there's a prohibition. It's one thing if it's not smart to disrupt a meeting. It's another thing if like you feel like if you were honest, people would be angry with you, or they would judge you, or they would take you down a peg. Which could bring us back to the old introversion. I'm not really coming up with a question here. I'm discussing this. I'm thinking about how, I guess the point is there a point at which emotional honesty or which relates to emotional intelligence, can it become problematic? Can it create problems for yourself? If you develop your own desire to be emotionally open and honest and communicate with others, but they're not in that same space, you could get yourself in trouble. How do we deal with that? Any thoughts? Yes.
May I? I think that happens all the time, and I've made decisions in my life where I stopped seeing people like that I considered friends for many years because I had like superficial relationship with them, and there was like they didn't reflect like the things that I want to talk about. Like they didn't want to engage in like a level that I thought that was interesting, and so I took a step back from that. But of course, we had like a shared history, and sometimes a bit disappointed why I was not seeing them anymore, and so forth. And that's not easy. But you cannot be friends with everyone, and having meaningful relationships takes time and is taxing, and we cannot have so many close relationships because of that. And that is difficult. That would be like one thing. The other thing is that if you're in an environment where people reject this approach, where they are just like, and I'm talking about my own experience, like in a very like masculine setting, like maybe in your soccer club or in like in your hedge fund or something, and where people saying, oh, this is just stupid, and you just like have to drink and like, oh, man up or whatever, and people don't take you seriously, then maybe it's time for you, if you think this is an important part of your life, then you cannot really be open in yourself in that context. And then you have to make the decision if that's something that you want or not. So I think that is, as always, a constant struggle, because not everyone is interested in that. Not everyone deals with this in what I would say a productive way. Or maybe they don't have to. Maybe they're just like happy all the time. But I doubt it. But how can I know?
Have you ever had the opposite experience? Have you ever, in say a professional setting, for example, because that's just the clear example. Have you ever told somebody, say after a meeting, pull somebody aside, you know what? The way you criticized my proposal, it was very personal. And I didn't say anything, but I want you to know you upset me, and I think that was inappropriate. Have you ever had a conversation like that and had the person actually turn around and say, "Oh, I didn't realize. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better," or something? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, plenty of times. I would say, like, if I felt that the person was like criticizing me in a way that I didn't appreciate, like I raised that. And on the other hand, I also don't know if I criticize someone, if it always falls on like if the person is open for that. So I'm always asking, like, do you think this is okay? And I also share that in like mistakes that I've made myself, in order to preface the criticism that I will give them, to show them like it's not about them. It's just like something that happens and that is like universal. Like a mistake's about maybe, I don't know, being sloppy about a proposal or something, or like one time where you didn't check your emails and something bad happened, that you just connect with them through that. Yeah, but plenty of times I try to give feedback and try to receive it. People are saying like, okay, just recently a friend of mine, because we have this trusting relationship, he told me that I asked too many questions, and some people don't have time for that, and that was hurtful. That was hurtful at first, because I thought I'm just curious and I want to learn more about what they're doing in order to connect more dots within the business of Students for Liberty, or like the non-profit, but it's business for me. And he told me that, and it was difficult to hear, but I acknowledged it and understood it, and now I'm like trying to be more cognizant about like, okay, is now the time to ask questions or not? Like I will still keep doing that because it's so important, but I'm like more aware of like the variables around it. So yeah, I do it.
That's pretty interesting. You turned my question around on me. Does anybody else have an experience like that? Share. No. I have one. I'll mention this.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I have to start the show.
Okay.
I lost my promo here.
Okay.
So.
All right. We're gonna have to wrap up then. Sorry. I have a Papa Lobo story on this subject that I'll share for another time. But thank you, audience, for this discussion. Thank you, Wolf, for sticking around and for your talk. Very interesting. You have given us new ideas to think about, and we shall.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Let's always shoot me an email if you want to learn more, if it can help you in any way. Yeah, I'm just thankful that people are out there who are thinking about these sort of things. So cheers.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.